Understanding the Times, Part 3, the Middle East. Well, the Middle East is very important to me personally, but it's important for us all. It's personally for me because that is my heritage. I am an Arab American that has lived in Australia for years and, of course, is involved with the United Kingdom and other places. So why is the Middle East so important? And why do we need to understand it in order to understand the times? As you can appreciate, I can only share a little bit in a short amount of time, but I'll try to hit on the main headlines. The normal answer to give to why the Middle East is important is, first of all, it has 69% of the world's proven oil reserves. Second, it is centrally located. It's basically the navel of the world landmass between Africa and Eurasia. And the third reason, which actually is the most important, is theology. It's something that's never discussed, but the Middle East is at the heart and core of theology, and particularly Bible prophecy. It's where civilization began and where civilization will culminate. Now, the region was ruled by the Turks, both in North Africa and in the Middle East, West Asia, as well as in Southeastern Europe, for about 400 years. And then the European powers took over after the Great War, World War I, and then these different entities under British and French mandates were given their independence. And one of the key places was Palestine, British mandatory Palestine, which became Jordan and Israel, and then also the territories. As it's turned out, Israel, the Jewish state, has become a household name and receives an inordinate amount of global attention, particularly from the United Nations, where between 1945 and 1990, that's 45 years, it was the subject of something like 1/3 of all UN resolutions. Now, when Israel celebrated its 75th anniversary, she got a Passover surprise from her neighbors. It was coordinated rocket and terror assault coming out of Gaza, coming out of Lebanon, coming out of Syria. Could all this be a dry run for a multi-front rocket war in the near future? We have to watch and we have to pray. Will Iran's nuclear program, which has been controversial and the subject of sanctions and UN resolutions and EU action and American action, of course, will they have a nuclear weapon breakout? Because Iran has missiles that can fly all over the Middle East and even in much of Europe too. This is something to watch and pray for as well. But let's look at it from another angle. The prophet Zechariah in chapters 12 and 14 spoke about Judah and particularly Jerusalem in the last days when it was simply a Turkish walled village, hardly the stuff of international attention. But Zechariah predicted in chapter 12 verse 2 that Jerusalem would become a cup of trembling for the neighbors when they besieged Judah and Jerusalem. Then in chapter 12 verse 3 he said that Jerusalem would be a burdensome stone for all people. All that seek to burden themselves with it will be cut into pieces. Then in chapter 14 verse 2 he said that God will gather all nations against Jerusalem. And then in verse 3 of chapter 14, God would personally come down and fight against those nations that he gathered. Very important prophetic thing. Oh, and let's not forget verse 4 of Zechariah 14, that God's feet will stand that day on the Mount of Olives. These are very exciting times, and there's more to be discovered. So join with us in Understanding the Times, or UTT, the tour for this year. More information can be found at our website at tan.org.au.